Hey, superachievers! This episode is part of a very special series I have curated for you. Your level of emotional intelligence is one of the most significant contributors to your success in life, however you choose to define success for you. In my emotional intelligence workshops, I use the EQI 2.0 model to help professionals and leaders assess how they are doing in self-perception, self-expression, interpersonal relationships, decision-making, and stress management, the main areas of the model. The model contains 15 competencies grouped into each of the areas I just mentioned. You can learn more about the model at mhs.com. So what is so special about this series? Each episode is a deep dive into a competency from the model with an expert who provides you with strategies for improving your emotional intelligence. In this episode, Rebecca Ondrey shares the importance of contributing to the greater community and how it relates to your level of emotional intelligence. Rebecca is a leadership coach, diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist, and facilitator who lives in Northeast Washington, D.C. She works as a consultant for OKA, a training, consulting, and publishing firm headquartered in Fairfax, Virginia. Welcome, Rebecca. Thank you for joining us again.
Thanks for having me, Chris. It's great to be back.
Well, for our listeners that didn't listen to the first two episodes you were on, can you share a little bit about your background?
Sure. So one thing I didn't share before is that I actually trained as a classical musician. I'm a pianist, but a while ago I pivoted into the development world, and so I'm a coach, a trainer, and facilitator for OKA, which is located in Northern Virginia, and we offer a variety of services, including coaching and training and facilitating, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But that's a little bit about me.
I love it. Yeah. And if you haven't listened to the other two episodes, you must go because they're really good on empathy and emotional expression. But today our topic is social responsibility. So let's start out with, what is it?
So social responsibility is part of within the EQI model. It's part of the interpersonal composite. This composite, unlike two that came before it, is very others focused. It's the part of us that's aware of the external, right? The environment, others, someone outside of myself. And social responsibility is our ability and tendency to cooperate and contribute to the welfare of the larger system, social systems. It's to have and act with a social consciousness and to show concern for the group or the greater community.
I love that. And I'm hoping, at least at this point in time, not many people would argue that that's a very important part of emotional intelligence.
Yeah,
I can see also it's very important to feel like you're part of a bigger something for people's motivation levels. But can we dive a little bit into why? Why is this important? Why is it part of emotional intelligence?
Well, I think you really nailed it when you said, it's helpful for us to feel like we're a part of something bigger than ourselves. And I think it's critical that we recognize, right? It helps bring to the surface that we are co-contributors to our environments, right? Whether that's our workplace, whether that's our home, our world, our community, we are co-contributors to it. And so rather than throwing stones at, to recognize what am I contributing to this space, to this organization, to this team. I think that's why it's critical. It helps us recognize and identify, how am I contributing? Where is my voice being used? Where's my influence? Where's the impact of my influence?
I love that, because often I find that when you talk social responsibility with folks in like the EQI class or coaching, they think of it synonymously with volunteering. Yeah. But it's so much more than that. Can you share like some examples of social responsibility for folks?
Sure. So social responsibility, people often think of like recycling. Right?
Yes.
Am I doing something to help the planet? Am I volunteering? But it has to do with caregiving. It has to do with support. I liken it to like, I see things from a 35,000 foot level, and I'm also boots on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it's that it is assistance. It can look like volunteerism. It can look, but it's more about our contribution and support to the greater whole. So that might be, my team. That might be, what am I contributing to my team? That might be my organization or my neighborhood even. Right. It doesn't have to be on this huge level. It can be something smaller, more local. And so it's, social responsibility can look like the support that I'm giving, or even mentoring within my organization, right? That it's, I have my own story and how I came up through the ranks, and I see some other person who maybe is seeking out advice, or is maybe struggling, and I have something to contribute. Right, I can help give them, a hand up in this situation, help them navigate these systems that I'm well versed in. So it can look like a number of ways. It can be, yes, writing checks. That's great. Supporting organizations, but also how can you, in teams, and we see this in organizations, some that do it really well. I think of a friend of mine who works at Deloitte, and they have a huge emphasis on volunteerism. And so they organize, for teams to go out together, to serve together. And so this seems a little contradictory, but if we look at it as in, I gain something from it too, right? It feels good to contribute. Yeah. It feels good to make a difference. And it builds within a team if we're working together to contribute something, maybe through volunteering or mentoring. I feel good. I like that person more too.
Yeah. So what does it look like if we're underutilizing social responsibility?
So if we're underutilizing social responsibility, if this is not a muscle that is engaged, we may seem really insensitive. We may seem disengaged. We may seem, well, quite frankly, irresponsible, right? Like we're not showing respect or concern for others' welfare or the betterment of the environment or the community. So we can seem really sort of aloof and disengaged and irresponsible.
Yeah. I'm assuming like very self-focused too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways to combat some self-regard that may be overdone, right, is, or the even really high emotional self-awareness is, can we pull in some more social responsibility, being others focused, dialing that radio signal into what's going on around me rather than what's going on inside of me.
So getting our face out of our phone would be step one.
We're all guilty of that. Unless you're using your phone to find opportunities to volunteer.
There we go.
We'll let that one slide.
Okay.
But yes, you're right.
So what are some other ways we can build on that muscle?
So one of the ways that we can build on that is to, do some research, ask around, find out when you hear of a need in your organization, right? Or on your team or in your environment, can you, pay attention, find ways, what's something that you could do to make a difference? And so to ask yourself, is there something that I could do? Is there something I could contribute? I have this great skill set and I'm using it, at work and maybe it's helping me to be successful, but how could I use that in another space, right? To raise someone up, to contribute, to better the environment. So that's one thing I would say is to do a little research, ask around. There's no end to the possibilities. There's no end to the needs in our world, in our community. And I think, by engaging social responsibility, we realize that we are co-contributors and that, the problems in our world are great. And our voice is needed, and our voice might be missing, and our influence and our impact might be missing. The truth is that no one person, right, can solve these problems in the world. But if I'm engaging that social responsibility and I'm willing to act and I'm willing to work together, I'd say that we'll be in a lot better shape if more people begin engaging their social responsibility. We can solve a lot more of the world's problems. We do this together.
Huge. Yeah. So now along those lines, some individuals will use that as an excuse to not engage in social responsibility. It's just my voice. I can't make a lot of change. What would be your response to that?
I'd say is that you have a unique story. You have a unique voice. And you may feel like what you could contribute is insignificant, but it is the collective, right, action of those in our community and our world. So you're right. And that's in saying that, Rebecca here, I might not make a huge difference, but me partnered with somebody else, right? Or partnered with an organization that's boots on the ground, has experience. I mean, that can make a huge impact. So I would ask you to reconsider. I would ask them to reconsider your voice, your story. There's a uniqueness to it. And there's a place for you to contribute. There's a place for you to make a difference, even if it's small.
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, one of the things I like to respond with that is we don't realize necessarily sometimes what makes a difference. Sometimes just a smile, at someone, maybe they don't go home and harm themselves. I've heard that story before, right? That totally kept them from doing that. We don't understand the impact, so we just show up and do our best to contribute to the greater good, and who knows, hope for the best.
Chris, I love that. And I think that's so true. And I've seen, some great stories and some great movies that have captured that, where, there's something that's seemingly insignificant makes a huge impact on someone.
Yeah.
And so you're right, how you show up, right? That's your responsibility, is to show up and to contribute. And it's really then you may never know, right, the impact. You may never be privy to the whole story, but trust that your positive actions, your positive behavior, positive attitude is going to contribute good to the world.
Yeah. And then there's always the ripple effect, right?
Yes.
Helps a little bit here that ripples out further. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, what about those that tend to overuse this strength?
As someone recovering from practicing too much social responsibility, I feel that I can speak on this. When we overly engage our social responsibility, then we can end up feeling like we're a martyr, right? Doesn't anybody see what's going on? Look at me, and spreading ourselves too thin. Like, I have to contribute. I feel this urge, this need, this urgency to contribute and make things better. And that excessive social responsibility can feel like it's too much. I'm overly sensitive to people's needs. I'm overly concerned with others and kind of maybe getting out of my lane and getting into other people's business. It can come across as self-righteousness too. So one of the ways that you can correct overdone social responsibility is to lean into into self-care, checking in, with yourself and what your needs are, through your own independence, through your self-regard, your own self-actualization. There's a few ways that you can balance out what could be overdone.
Yeah. Now, also, I was thinking about there was, and it was funny. I think it was a story during my certification class. I can't remember who was teaching it, but she said that she overused this as well, and she called it the martyr. And she said that it led her to actually judge others for not contributing as much. Suggestions for overcoming that?
That is a good question. And so I think one way that you could overcome that, again, is by pulling in some empathy, right? And so sometimes that empathy can be so focused on, those who are lesser than, when empathy really needs to be engaged for all the people that we interact with. And so when we find that judgment taking over, then it's likely that there's a perspective that we're leaving on the table, right? There's likely that there's a story there. And so I bring it back to something I mentioned earlier, which is, everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about. And so that to counter that sort of judging behavior or tendency is to realize that, you may feel this responsibility, and that's great. Somebody else, they may be carrying something else. They may be contributing in ways you know nothing about. And so instead of with that overly engaged social responsibility, instead of, leaning towards judgment, is to leaning towards curiosity. That's, I think, one of the best ways to counter that.
I love that. Yeah, tap into that empathy. And it's funny, when you were talking about lesser than, I thought of, have you read any of the Arbinger Institute's work, like Heart of Peace?
No, I haven't.
Oh, great resources for that. They did Leadership and Self-Deception, Heart of Peace. I think that's what it's called, Heart of Peace. And then Outward Mindset. And I think those would be great resources for folks to follow up on if they have those that they need to work on.
Awesome. Thank you. You can share the links with me. I would love that.
Now, any other resources or anything else related to social responsibility you think our listeners would benefit from?
I think that, stepping towards social responsibility, I think sometimes we have to frame it as a selfish step, which feels wrong, but is ironically right, which is look for what's in it for you, right? Which is how you could contribute, what feels good, right, to volunteer, or I will add it to my resume. I mean, that hopefully is not your only motivator, but sometimes that's what we need to do, how we need to frame it for ourselves to give us the push into action that we need to take. I feel strongly about social responsibility. It's one I've contended with, and finding that baby bear porridge, that balance of what's just right, what's, leaning away from what's too much, but having just enough. I can't emphasize this enough, that when we recognize that we are co-contributors to the world around us, to the organizations, to our homes, to our culture, and we embrace that responsibility and take action, I think the world becomes a much better place. I think that we learn to solve problems, right? And we learn, we find solutions together to tackle really heavy and difficult things that we're facing.
And we all benefit from that.
Yes, absolutely.
I love that. So the why is a huge motivator, right? Figuring out your why. Huge motivator for instituting new behaviors. And I also love, I actually call it the Goldilocks principle of the not too much, not too little. Yeah, the just right.
I love that. And your Goldilocks level may be different than someone else's.
Exactly.
Right? And so that's where we have to be careful with that judging tendency of, they're making contributions in their own way. And I feel called to this, or I feel motivated or inspired to do this. So I'm going to own it and take it and do this. This is what's just right for me.
I love it. And I hear accountability in there as well.
Yes. That's a theme emerging from all of this, Chris.
Yes. Nice. Can you share a little bit about your products and services?
Sure. So here at OKA, we have a number of tools, assessment tools, certifications that we offer that really help enhance professional development. The coaching that we offer for executives and at various levels can really help transform mindsets and help people carve out next steps in their career, next steps in their lives. So I'm just excited to highlight a couple of them. So the EQI, of course, which highlights emotional intelligence, the change style indicator, which really looks at how we navigate change. And we all have different styles. So this looks at, especially if you're going through a transition, if you're in your team, are navigating a lot of change, which, it's here, it's with us, it's always with us, change. And so the change style is a great tool to utilize and for coaching, for development. So I want to highlight that one. And then just check out our website, oka-online.com, and you can find a lot of our resources and products and tools that we offer.
Awesome. Oh, thank you. And what is your final piece of advice in this area?
I think when it comes to social responsibility, think about your uniqueness. Think about the gifts, the skills that you have. How can you contribute? What could you plug into? Maybe ask around. Chances are there's somebody in your network, right, who knows of a need that you could help with, knows of a service or a gap that you could help fill. So embrace who you are and find ways to share who you are with the world.
Oh, I love it. Powerful. Oh, thank you so much, Rebecca.
Thanks, Chris.
To learn more about Rebecca, visit her website at oka-online.com.